Happy Monday! I'm Courtney Larvadane, and this is Mompreneur Mondays. 2.5-year-old and a 4.5-month-old. And I am also the owner and managing director of Glow Social Media, where we offer social media teaching and training. I am super excited because my featured guest today is Charmaine Brown. She is a friend and a mentor and a fellow mom boss, and she is going to jump on and tell us all about her journey. If you've been following along with us, I get on here every Monday and have a conversation with a special guest where we talk about what our journey to entrepreneurship and motherhood has been, and have kind of the chicken and the egg conversation where we can talk about what comes first. So whether you had your children first or your business first, and what the intersection of that is. So for me, it was my business came first. I started my business 8 years ago and really had kind of gotten into the groove of entrepreneurship and running a business. And then came marriage and kids. And I am right smack in the middle of figuring out what it looks like to have and grow a business with the children that, need to be taken care of. And oftentimes entrepreneurship and owning your own business is a lot different than working in corporate America and going into an office every day. And a lot of us are learning now in these quarantine times that being at home often means that you kind of default having to do a lot of things. And whether you are a man or a woman, have children or a spouse or don't, you realize that when you're home all the time, you end up having to take care of everything. So you have to think about what's for dinner, and you say, oh, let me throw some clothes in the laundry. And it's not as simple as just sitting down for 8 hours and saying, I'm just going to work for this period of time. It all just kind of meshes together. And that's really what a lot of us work from home solopreneurs have been experiencing for many years, that mesh of home life and work life, and just figuring out how it all balances together. I've been sharing, and you can always go to watch this replay on YouTube. I've been sharing some tips and tricks and things that I do to stay organized and flexible, because I think flexibility is really the name of the game. So many of us are working from home now for an extended period of time due to being pseudo-quarantined, and lots of businesses' offices are still closed. And one of the things that I think is really important is coming up with a schedule. So one of my last talks, I explained how there are lots of different things that you can do to stay organized. And by far, my number one organization tip is getting up early and starting the day in sort of the same type of routine. Another thing that I really like to do is try to work on the most important stuff first thing in the day, because it's so easy, and I am victim to this 100%, especially now. It's so easy to kind of get up, have your coffee, and then, start to do the dishes or throw a load of clothes in the washing machine. And all of that stuff gets you so distracted, especially if there's work to be done. So my recommendation is get up in the morning, get dressed, and yes, schedules are key. And getting dressed, getting your coffee, and then going and sitting in your workspace. And for me, I don't always have, I'm gonna only have 5 minutes. So it's not that I'm gonna sit down and, jump right in and get to work, but I sit down and I gather my thoughts. I open my planner, I see what I've written for the day. If it's Monday, like today, I make sure my planner is completely filled out. Maybe some meetings got shifted and I need to, rearrange some things on my planner. I do that and I update my to-do list in my planner. So I have a planner, a success journal, where there are categories for your to-dos, and they're urgent, important, and then kind of like a, pending or not super important. And I try really hard not to fill up the urgent, because what really is urgent? And there are a few things that I'll put in there. Everything else pretty much goes into important, and then really other things that I'm thinking about or brainstorming and want to work on go in that third line category. And that just helps me stay organized and figure out what in the world I have going on for the day, for the week, really. And that's how I try to start my day, just by sitting down and going over what I have to do. So then at least I know, because it's so easy when we're at home right now. Even when we weren't at home and you're out and about, it's easy to look up and it's Wednesday and you realize you have all this stuff that you wanted to get done for the week and you haven't really prioritized it. Another thing that I've learned from lots of years working with business coaches is the power of creating time blocks. So there are two ways to create time blocks, and I like to put these either in writing on my planner or digitally on my device. And there are two ways to think through time blocking. There is the way where you have recurring tasks each week. So maybe for your business, there are certain things you need to do every week, whether it has to do with finances, or whether it has to do with tasks for client management or working on your own business and maybe marketing for your business. Those are things you need to do every week. So you can actually put recurring blocks on your calendar. And the reason I love this is twofold. One, you have to prioritize working on your business, and oftentimes we never get around to it. And if it's not on your calendar likely fills up. So if I know Tuesday at 10, I really need to work on marketing for my business, I can put a 30 to 45 minute block in the calendar, and then that way it can't get scheduled over. Oftentimes, stuff will come up and someone will say, well, let's look at our calendars. And if you look at your calendar and it's like Tuesday's wide open, even though your to-do list is a mile long, you're not going to get accomplished the things that you need to get accomplished for your business. So that's really something that I like to do, which is blocking out repeatable tasks that I need to get done on a regular basis. Also, there is time blocking for your to-do list. So our to-do list changes day to day, week over week. But what can be really helpful is if I know on Wednesday I have a 3-hour block of time, I'll go in ahead of time and write out all of my to-dos in that 3-hour block, from the most important tasks first to the least important. And that really helps me to stay organized. So we are going to hop right in and have our guest join us. I am so excited. And we're going to Charmaine Brown and talk a little bit about her journey as a mompreneur. Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfect. Thanks so much for jumping on and joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Courtney.
Well, we'll hop right in. I was talking a little bit about scheduling and to-do lists and all that stuff, so we'll get to that. But let's start out by learning a little bit about you. So just give us the brief rundown of who you are, family, your work, all the other things that you do, in a nutshell.
Oh, in a nutshell? Are you
right.
sure?
How much time have we got?
All right. I will try my best. So Charmaine Brown, I am an entrepreneur. I own a consulting practice in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space called Connexions Consulting. I am a mother to an incredible 13-year-old who keeps us quite busy and on our toes. And I am the better part the better half of my marriage to my husband, Fernie Brown. And so between the business, being a mom, being a wife, that keeps me busy. But then I also have to like be extra, you know, and add on more responsibilities. I'm the president of the National Association of Women Business Owners here in Greater Detroit, which I am proud to be serving along with you, Courtney. And I started up a podcast called Simply Living Me. My husband and I also own a wholesale spice business. So yeah, it's crazy.
Right, it's busy, but that's how you keep it all straight. If there wasn't a lot, you wouldn't know what to juggle.
Yeah, I would shrivel up. I really
Right.
would if, yeah.
Well, thank you for telling us all about that. And we're going to get into a lot of those things. But where I like to start this conversation is kind of the chicken and the egg. So, mompreneur is this kind of tag phrase of, you know, you're a mom and you're an entrepreneur, and these worlds are just meshed together. So, tell us what came first, the mom or the entrepreneur, and kind of what that journey and, you know, where it came together.
Yeah, so definitely the mom came first before the entrepreneur. I worked in corporate America for almost 28 years before becoming an entrepreneur, and my daughter is 13 years old. So baby came before the entrepreneurship baby. Um, I I was a working mom in corporate America with a beautiful baby that I was fortunate enough to spend 14 weeks instead of the traditional 12 weeks at home with her. And then she became a before and aftercare kid up until 5 years ago. 5 years ago, my husband and I relocated from Cleveland, Ohio to Detroit, Michigan for his job. He was on the partnership track. And so we made this incredible decision to relocate to really grow his career. And it was at that point that I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. So it was in some ways being a mom was a lot easier with the transition, the move from Cleveland to Michigan, because I wasn't working. And so I could spend time with her. You know, I did the bus stop, which was something that she really was excited to do, was to actually get on the bus and come home right after school let out instead of going to aftercare.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to jokingly refer to myself as, because I would never say I was the housewife, I was the trophy wife.
Right.
And then because I started up my own practice, I started it up out of my residence. So I still kind of built my schedule around my daughter's schedule. And I built it around, you know, when I had to take her to the bus stop and pick her up from the bus stop. And it was great from that standpoint because I had never experienced this quote unquote, you know, mothering, bus stop, volunteering at school, you know, all the things.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't experienced it because I was in corporate America, and, you know, I had to utilize the resources that were available to me because not only was I working a typical 8 to 5 job, but because the role I had, I was, you know, having powdered egg breakfast meetings early in the morning and rubber chicken dinners at night at galas and things like that. So it was just a lot. So I was really enjoying the pace and the flexibility that I had to really be present for my daughter. And I think that's one of the things that the entrepreneurship track has provided for me.
Absolutely. And more time to fill your schedule with lots of other extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
Which is nice. So you started your consulting business, and then where did the spice business come in?
Well, let's say my husband's brainchild. He is an entrepreneur at heart. So a lot of my entrepreneurship skills, building that muscle, right? Because there is this whole building a different skill sets when you become an entrepreneur, even if you are an expert in the field or an expert in what you're selling or services that you're selling. So I've learned an incredible lot from him just because of his own entrepreneurship spirit. And so he's always looking at opportunities, right? And his brother knew someone who actually owned a wholesale spice business. It's a brick and mortar, and she didn't do anything online. There was none of her business is online, and she's a multi-million-dollar business. Wow. Yeah. And so we decided that we would, dive into the business and repackage it under the Simply My Spice brand and sell spices from all over the world. And it's been an amazing journey thus far, but I do have to give my husband credit for seeing the vision, because I didn't see it at all.
Yes. So what would you say is kind of the biggest lesson you've learned in starting your own business and, having to manage family and household and all of that stuff?
Yeah. So this is something that I have not really learned up until about 1.5 years ago. And I think it does come with the maturity of your business or access to resources. But you have got to leverage knowledge and skills and expertise in spaces that you do not know, right? So in the beginning, especially with a business like my consulting practice, I didn't need a lot of startup costs. So I didn't need to get a business loan for equipment or anything like that, right? So I was really working off of very, very, very slim dollars. So I was always concerned about bringing someone on to share in some of the responsibilities of servicing a client. I was concerned about outsourcing accounting and, all the things that, number one, I'm just not really good at. So I rolled my sleeves up and learned it as best I could. But I think because of the maturity of my business and where it's at now, and I have the ability to pay for those services, it has made my life so much easier. And so what I would say is, I think it's important that you understand how to do things like, bookkeeping, like the basics of bookkeeping, because you still have to have oversight for that stuff, right?
Yes, right.
You have somebody running your stuff and you
don't know anything, right? Because that's a surefire way to
knocking on the door and you're like, oh, okay.
Right.
So you do need to understand it, but if I had to go back and do it all over again, I would find a way to leverage my resources so that I could spend more time doing the work that I actually love to do and the work that actually brings in more work, right? Business development, relationship building. Those are the things that I love to do. That's the stuff that helps you bring in work.
Yes.
I would also say too, and a perfect example of this was probably in my second year in business. I had a very, very large project. It was the biggest, project that I had in terms of the fees. And I spent so much time implementing that project that I didn't spend enough time business developing. And when that project was over, you talk about it was a rough year because I didn't continue cultivating while I was implementing. And so I would say that's probably just as important, is to make sure that you are still doing both.
Yes.
Business development and implementation. And if you can't do them both, then you need to find somebody to help you with
Yeah.
implementation.
Yes. And how do you put serious thought and planning into the amount of time and when and how often you do that? Or do you just kind of keep it in the back of your head? Oh, I need to make sure that I'm focusing on this. Or do you have, a written kind of plan that it's like, okay, these are some of the things that I'm going to do?
Mm-hmm. Well, in a perfect world, I would love to tell you that I have a well-written, documented, graphed out plan, but I don't.
Right.
I don't. Nor do I have a business plan either. After 5 years of being in business, I don't have a business plan. And I think that it really depends on your business, and it depends on where you're trying to grow your business.
Mm-hmm.
So when I get to the place where I'm like, I have to grow my business, then that's when the planning for me takes place.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you that the reality is that I look at my engagements, I look at the projects that I have, and I look to see where might I need additional resources. And now I'll give you a perfect example. I have 3 clients right now that I had to develop a team of folks to help me with stakeholder interviews. There's such quality and value in doing those interviews, but I can't do them all. So I brought on people that I knew had a comfort level and an ease level that I also felt could make the stakeholder feel comfortable so that we
Mm-hmm.
could get information out of, right? Like not everybody can interview, let's just say
Right.
that. So that helps me in terms of managing my issues with capacity when you have lots of activity going.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition, I did take a step back and said, what are the things that I love most about what I do? Oh, look at, he's so sweet. What are the things that I love most about what I do? And I love engaging with the stakeholders. I love going after the deal, right? I love
Mm-hmm.
that, the high of getting that yes. And I love being able to spend time with all of the stakeholders. What I like least, although I do love to do it, but what I like least is the analysis and pulling the
Mm-hmm.
report together. So I've
Mm-hmm.
hired a content administrator to help me with that. So over time, you kind of get smart
Mm-hmm.
about where you need to plug the holes or bring someone in or others in to help you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, figuring out what your strengths and weaknesses, but like you said, what you like and the best and what you like the least, which aren't always the same as the strengths and weaknesses. And you can start to kind of plug and play these different pieces to really create something that works best for you and really gives you the most amount of.
Right.
So to kind of switch gears a little bit, what advice would you give? Because, right now with, us still in kind of semi-quarantine, lots of people are saying, oh, I want to start this on the side, or now is the perfect time to start my business. What advice do you give to someone, especially that mom who's with homeschooling and like this whole thing, but really wants to do it? What are some things that maybe she can do or think about right now, specifically given the climate, that might make her journey a little easier so we can all work together?
Yeah. So I am such a believer in the gift of time. And in some ways, 2020 has provided that for us, even though it's been very many of us in ways. I would say to leverage the concept of power 30 years and make sure, can you, hey, Courtney?
Okay.
Can you
Are you
hear me,
there? Yeah,
Courtney?
I think I lost you for a second. I'm sure it
Okay.
was probably me.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
Okay.
I'll start over.
Okay.
I believe in the power of in the gift of time. And like I was saying before, I think that this, although it's been a very difficult year for all of us, we have been given the gift of time. And what I mean by that is um our way of operating has significantly changed. And that affords you an opportunity if you just spent just a little bit of time every day cultivating that idea or that thought that you've always kind of said, you know, I always love to do dot, 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 right?
Yep.
And if you implement what's called power 30s or power hours, just 1 hour a day, you figure out when that time is. If the baby is down for a nap, or if the kids are online and you don't need to oversee that, you know, like you can get away, go hide in a closet, go hide on the floor. Like I've done that, you know, but just an hour or 30 minutes of your time dedicated every day to writing down and cultivating that idea, that concept. And I encourage you to do it without boundaries, right? Don't say, I would love to be able to do this, but I can't. That's not,
Yes.
you cannot have that involved in this process. It's gotta be wide open, without boundaries, no excuses, no worry about money, no worry about who's gonna take care of the kids, none of that. And then what you'll wind up is almost a plan or an idea that you can really build. And, you know, I encourage people to like do this for like a week or two, sit it down, go back to it, and then write out, well, who would I need or what would it take to get it done?
Yeah.
And you look up and you all damn near got a business plan or something close
Yes.
to it, right?
And
so
a lot of those things start to fall in place because you've written it down.
Because you gave it life.
Yeah.
Right? You gave it life.
I love it.
We don't give our ideas life because we make excuses for why we can't do it.
Yeah. I love that. That's really great advice. I love that idea. And I think even if we have a business and we feel like everything's rocking, it makes sense to do that every once in a while, just about whatever, because you never know what's going to come out of those sessions. And I am trying to get back to my journaling because even, you know, just the act of writing it down just helps and makes a big difference. So speaking of,
go ahead.
I'm
sorry. Go ahead. What I was going to say is what's been happening to me lately is if I have a thought, sometimes I'll be like, oh, you know, in my head, I'll get back to that. And I never do, or I forget the thought. So what I have posters all over this house right now because if I have a thought, I write it down. Like just a small example, a friend of mine gifted me with a Simply Living Me mug. And I said, wow, this would be really cool if I had a notebook in my head, right? But I wrote it down and I'm like, oh, so now and then it gets your mind thinking about other things. We tend to stop that process. It's not fair to us, right?
Yes. And you never, even just the smallest thing, my example that actually is something that you did, you sent me that beautiful postpartum celebration box when the baby came and I loved it. And the very first thing I thought was, I want to give this to someone. I want to send someone a box. But that's one of those thoughts, like you said, you just think it and then you never do it. You don't remember the name of the company, you know, all that. But I wrote it down. I wrote down the name of the company, how to get in touch with her. And then sure enough, when a friend of mine got engaged, I said, oh, this is my opportunity to send a box. And those are the types of things that it's like, it goes in your mind and out and, you know, you don't do anything with it.
Sometimes we just don't pay enough attention to the whispers, right? To me, sometimes those are whispers. and if it keeps getting louder and louder, then there's something to it, but we don't pay enough attention to the whisper. And the whisper could be the very thing that changes our lives.
That's so true. That is so, so true. So speaking of quarantine, COVID, all of that we are still in the midst of for who knows how long, how have you adjusted? And, what are some things that you just had to have your come to Jesus moment and say, we're in this, so let me get my life together and figure out how to make it happen? So what are the things that you've implemented just to make it through?
Being kind to myself and being and allowing myself to feel exactly how I feel without trying to ignore it, because for me, ignoring the signs manifests itself physically, right? So I tend to get really I get incapacitated, right? So it might be a back issue. Of course, I had major surgery this summer, so I sometimes God will force you to sit down.
Yes.
But I think the first thing was acknowledging that this is not easy, and that it's okay to not always want to be the tough one, because we're already as moms, and then as entrepreneurs, we're solutions driven, right? We always want to fix it. We gotta, roll up our sleeves and just get it done. And that can be extremely taxing. So I've learned, to pay more attention and be okay with feeling the way that I feel. There was a point in time where things were relatively quiet on the business side, but not in a stressful way where I was concerned for my business. So there were parts of me that actually was enjoying coming down off of this crazy roller coaster. And then when
we'd all been running the rat race, for sure.
We've been running the rat race. That's why I keep saying that even though it's been an incredibly stressful, traumatic year, in some ways it has given us the gift of time. We have been forced to slow down. And so I don't want to look back when things get as normal can be, and regret not taking advantage of that time to maybe fix some things or to adjust life or whatever, right?
Yes.
I also, in terms of quarantining, I am zoomed out, but it's the only way that I can safely connect with people because I'm such an extrovert. I really, really, really had a hard time not being around people. And so I obviously use the hell out of my Zoom, although I have been using Zoom for 5 years, people. So thank you for finally joining my planets.
Yes.
But and so that was a way for me to connect with my friends and my family. And it's interesting, it allowed me to connect with people that you would otherwise be like, hey, we should get together sometime.
And you never do. Yeah.
It was happening. So
and that's nice. That's a lot of good that can come out of it. That is. So what have you, and you kind of answered this question a little bit, but what have you liked the most and liked the least about this new normal that we're in?
What I have loved is, although it's kind of a catch-22 for me, but it's the slower pace of things. And what I mean by that is the elimination of the rat race to get the child to school, to pick her up, to get to that meeting, the whole just kind of transition process to go places, to get dressed up. I don't have to worry about this right here and above.
I know, it's nice.
got my sweatpants on.
Right.
You know,
a t-shirt looks so totally different on Zoom.
Doesn't
it?
it?
Does.
Doesn't
It
it?
does in person.
Oh my God. So I love that we have kind of taken off we've taken off the fast pace of life, right? And it slowed us down. What I least like is that I have to be thoughtful about who I'm around. And I don't like that. I have to be thoughtful about what places and spaces I go into for safety reasons.
Yeah.
And that it's not just about me, because I can go out and have a great time and come back and do damage to my household.
Yeah.
I hate that.
I know. It's like, and I think, especially those of us who enjoy being around other people, this was something that you couldn't have really seen coming, and just the kind of hard stuff what used to be every day, you never knew who you would run into, and the things that you would do, and all of that.
Yeah.
And for me, and I know you're like this too, I am so energized by the physical fission waves of a human being in my present, where you come up with ideas, you think of things, and all that Post-it note stuff used to happen so much more when I was physically around people. And so I agree that the initial slowdown of that was really difficult, of just feeling like I have nothing, I have no ideas, I have no, and slowly now figuring out, what that voice is, maybe by myself, and then also how to connect with people virtually and all that.
Now, I will tell you, speaking of that, I had to create that space, because I had been sitting on my podcast for like 2 years, and I knew that if I didn't bring together some of my closest friends to help me massage it and almost in some ways hold me accountable, then it would be another 2 years. And so I did find a way to kind of create that space, that post board process. But it's like you have to be intentional about creating it versus it happening naturally when you're physically with people.
Yes. And I do think the flip side of that is we might have not had the time to start these things, We've all been, running the rat race, doing a million things, and you sometimes just need the space to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to start the thing.
Why does it sound like you have two in addition to the baby? You got 2 toddlers there?
Right, I know. They're both
baby?
loud. They're both loud.
Hey, Trip.
What, Trip, you want to say hi?
No, hi. Bye.
Hi, bye.
He's saying bye. He's saying goodbye. So tell me about, in mentioning the podcast, what are you working on right now? What do you want people to know about you? Where can they learn about what's going on, the podcast and your work and all that stuff?
Yeah.
I'm gonna grab the baby.
Oh, Harper. That's all she wanted.
I know she did. She wanted to get up.
That's all she wanted. So I'll start with my consulting practice. So I mentioned that I do diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting. I do assessments and strategic plans for lots of companies that are at the beginning stages of their DEI journey. And so, if organizations that are still looking to prioritize this work, and they're really at the beginning of the process, I am, that's my sweet spot. That's what I tend to work best with, organizations that are in that stage.
Well, the timing is right. So every organization should be.
Well, that's a whole
Picking up
nother
the phone.
discussion, but
Yes,
yes.
that's a part two.
And it's interesting. I have the philosophy that I don't care at this point how they come to the table wanting this work. I just want them to do it, right? So we can talk about why they didn't prioritize it in the past and all of that, or what's driving them to do. I don't care at this point. Let's get you set up appropriately, and let's get you focused on achieving the right goals and objectives, right? Because there's many consultants out there, especially these days, that have decided that, ooh, this is a space that I should be operating in, but really don't have the expertise. And so that does do damage to the industry. It does damage to the organizations. And I'm hoping that that more of us who are in those roles get tapped more than those that are not. So make sure you vet those people.
Yes, right. Yes, vet your people. And then what about that CEO who was saying that he couldn't find any qualified Black candidates? I don't even remember where that was. I put him and his company out of my mind.
Yeah. You know what? Honestly, it could be that company. There's several companies, several leaders in this country who use that same language and have that same sentiment. And we know that it's not that they're not out there. It's just that you're not looking at the right sources, or your unconscious bias is getting in the way of you being able to identify talent that really could be a great fit for your organization. So I hear that all the time. And I hear how unique certain industries are. And while there are industries that really have delayed cultivating diverse talent, right, across the years, that still does not mean that we should give up and that there aren't solutions to start addressing the problem. And unfortunately, it's been the convenient excuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So call you.
So that's what I do. And then my podcast, Simply Living Me, I've always wanted to do a podcast or some kind of opportunity where that really use my experience transitioning from corporate life to entrepreneurship and all the things that I've learned about myself. I went through a significant transition in life, and helping to kind of rediscover myself, and not realizing that much of what I was doing, I was putting myself in a box, and I was in boundaries, even though I was very successful in that box. Like, it wasn't like I was unsuccessful. I was highly successful. But my transition helped me to understand that there was so much more to life. There were so much more opportunities out there. And I found that I was able to learn more about myself through this process. And what I found was many women, especially women my age, although I feel like I'm your age, but I'm not. Women in my age bracket that are in their 40s and beyond, that have been successful in their corporate careers, if you ask them, would you be doing what you're doing today if you could redesign it all over again? And almost 90% of them have said no. And there was something to that. And so I decided to start the Simply Living Me podcast as a way to start to bring out some of those conversations that we also don't like to talk about, because I am, me, I'm pretty much an open book, and I want to normalize a lot of conversations and a lot of feelings that we have as women in particular, and women of color. And so my podcast is really all about that. It's about getting you to a place where you are truly authentically living simply for yourself. So I'm really excited. My last podcast was on the fact that I have anxiety and clinical anxiety, and that don't we all have anxiety in some way? And Courtney, is kind of interesting. One of the things I've learned about myself is that when I'm most nervous about pressing send, about putting things out there, that is when I make the biggest impact on folks and on situations. And so those are things I'm learning about myself. And I believe that it's because I journeyed into this entrepreneurial space to do that.
Yeah. And I think you did. And the people that I just look at it, you know, knowing you and knowing just the impact that you have on people and how everyone is like your best friend as soon as they meet you, which is so amazing. Just that this being an entrepreneur and having, you know, kind of widening your net of your network and the people that and places and opportunities that you get, I feel like this is a journey and a path that you just had to be on, you know, you personally, because you just are meant for this space. And regardless of what your business, right?
If you'd have met me 5 years ago, I'm like, Courtney, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. I am a corporate C-suite chick. I'm gonna retire. I'm gonna get it all in this box.
Yes. And I think we do that. We do that to ourselves in a lot of different ways. I mean, I've even been exploring lately how even entrepreneurship can be a box, and just being, you know, around that type of people only, and only being open to the things that other entrepreneurs are saying. And it's like, if you work somewhere, I don't want to hear anything that you have to say, but I think it's important to go step outside of yourself and say, no matter what I'm doing, I very well could be operating in that box and need to step out of it at times.
Yeah. We won't know until we try. And that's the thing.
Exactly.
Like, whew, the other side can be so incredible.
Yes.
That you just cannot avoid at least walking through those doors and seeing what you can do to cultivate it.
You have to give it a try. Awesome. So where can everyone find you? Your podcast, is that on all podcast channels? Where can we find the podcast? Where do we find you?
Yes. It's so funny how I was like, oh my God, I finally made it. I made it on iTunes.
Yes. You made it.
So iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and I am on LinkedIn as Charmaine Brown, and I am on IG as simply Charmaine B, and I am on Facebook as Charmaine Brown.
Awesome. And if you are watching this on YouTube, everything will be below in the fabulous description. And if you're watching this on Instagram TV, I'll put some tags so you can find Charmaine and follow along, because her journey is exciting. Well, thank you so much for hopping on today and sharing words of wisdom and your journey. And it's just always fabulous to see your face. I'm glad it's been more lately than, you know, it has been on this quarantine. Right? So we're getting back there.
I know.
Well, thanks so much.
Slowly but surely. Thank you so much for having me, Courtney.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Charmaine. And we will see you next Monday.